So in the last lecture, we were talking about India, Nepal. Now, so what we'll do is today we'll complete largely the India, Nepal bit, and then we'll be talking about, in brief, about, ma'am has discussed with you Pakistan, right? So, has she talked about has she talked about Afghanistan? No. So we'll have a brief discussion about Afghanistan. Okay. Now Afghanistan is one country where one can study as much as one wants, and it is a very complicated region to say the least. However, from your exam point of view, agar Afghanistan se question aayega, it will only be of a very specific nature about the implications of the rise of Taliban to power in Afghanistan and its impact on Indian foreign policy or its significance for India. So we are only concerned from that viewpoint. Now, just 1 second. Yes. So I think you've gotten you've received that handout for India, Nepal, and while most of the things on internet nahi chal raha hai isme. So while most of the things on India, Nepal we have anyways talked about, we can broadly, I've given you that handout primarily so that you can go through a couple of those maps also, which I was talking about, was the Trans-Himalayan railways that the Chinese side has proposed to construct. And while we were discussing India, Nepal, I told you about the significance and a brief historical context, right, as to what has been happening up till 2015. Internet is so about the brief historical context and the significance of India, Nepal, that is something that we've discussed. However, what we are yet to talk about broadly, and I've given you some sense of the key challenges, but what we have to write or discuss is predominantly the key challenges in the India, Nepal relationship. Just 1 second. So when we talk about the India-Nepal relationship, there are a couple of challenges that I talked about. The first challenge is the fact of the increasing Chinese presence in South Asia, and Nepal, unlike Bhutan, has been more than willing to play the China card against India. That's the first major challenge. The second major challenge is about the fact, and this is something that I want you to understand. When you look at Bhutan and when you look at Nepal, they are partly a study in contrast. While the possibility of cooperation exists with both of them, in reality, a close economic cooperation has been realized with Bhutan, but not so much with Nepal. For example, the arena of hydropower cooperation. When it comes to hydropower cooperation, Bhutan is exporting a large part of its hydropower generated to India or through India to other countries also. It seeks to do so in the near future. But when it comes to Nepal, despite having a huge hydropower potential, it is still a power deficit country. It is not even producing enough for its own requirement, what to talk about exporting it to third countries. So even hydropower cooperation, while the potential is huge, I told you that the potential is almost to generate something around 60,000 megawatts. But the reality is we are selling them 600 megawatts of electricity right now. They're not producing enough to meet their own economic needs as well. So that potential remains underutilized or underrealized. The third challenge is what? The poor implementation of the existing projects, announced projects, or projects which are currently in implementation. For example, when it comes to a number of other projects, like many other number of hydropower projects which have been announced from time to time, such as I told you the Pancheshwar Dam project, which was announced in 1996, but is yet to see the light of the day. So what this does tell us, just one second. What this does tell us is that there is much which remains to be realized in the India-Nepal relationship. Now, if that is clear, then let's go ahead and talk about, and you can write down with me, about the related aspects. Just one second. So, and one of the last things when we talk about challenges is that what is happening in case of Nepal, I told you, is gross political instability, which is not there in case of Bhutan. Bhutan, the monarchy has also been popular, and since even their turn towards democracy, there has been a certain degree of continuity in India-Bhutan relations, which has been missing in India-Nepal relations. So all of these actually make things a bit more complicated. Now, if you remember yesterday, I just wanted to show you a couple of maps and I've given most of the relevant details here. Now, if you remember, I was telling you that the Chinese are building the Trans-Himalayan railways, and to that extent, China has already completed the construction from Shigaste and Lhasa all the way up to Girong, which is along the Nepal-China border, and from Girong, which is in Tibetan China, the rail line still has to be extended up to Kathmandu. Now that stretch remains to be completed, and also though I have not told you this, that while that stretch remains to be completed, the Nepali political elites are playing another game with the Chinese this time, and that is that this 100-kilometer stretch of the project is also expensive. And the Nepal has witnessed how Sri Lanka has partly landed itself in a debt trap vis-a-vis China. So what the Nepali elites and the political class is urging China is to go ahead and construct this 100-kilometer leg, take up the construction of this 100-kilometer leg, not backed by any loan, but backed by Chinese grant. And the Chinese are not right now providing grant for this. So because if they provide loans, then these loans have to be paid back. The project has to be financially viable. But if it is given as a grant, then the financial pressure on the Nepali side will reduce. So what is to be understood is that there is a lack of economic logic because of the geographical challenges, which limit the possibility of having large-scale connectivity between Nepal and China, right? So that's something that I've already discussed and told you about. Now, one of the last things, one of the strengths of the India-Nepal relationship, if you remember, I also told you, was an open border, right? Because that open border has ensured large amount of people-to-people, marital linkages, people-to-people linkages, and also a large number of Nepalese citizens finding employment in India. Now, while that is a strength of the relationship, such an open border also creates certain challenges. The challenges that such an open border creates, if I was to give you examples, firstly, it creates security challenges for India. The security challenge is that having such an open border where one doesn't require a passport or a visa means that such a route can be used by whom? Terror groups or terror groups or armed groups for infiltrating into India and launching certain attacks. That's one. It can be used to push in fake currency. It can be used for human trafficking. It can be used for narco trafficking. It can be used for smuggling in of arms. So, and this is a security challenge that an open border poses. Now, the question that often comes is that in the light of such what challenges, whether that comes from terrorism or narco terrorism, or one could say even from human trafficking or other kinds of fueling in of other kinds of illegal activities through such an open border, what should be India's response? Should India's response must be to close the border, or should it be to actually increase surveillance on the border? The answer has been to increase. As I said, the answer is not to close the border. The answer is not to fence the India-Nepal border. Okay. In fact, the answer is to actually create more integrated checkposts along the border, improve the border infrastructure. For example, if you go to Atari, Wagah, right, there is the integrated checkpost at Atari Wagah, which has a huge capacity of screening goods. Okay, now constructing such checkposts is also requires a certain amount of devolution of resources. To give you the example that practically if you go at Atari, then the integrated checkpost there, then the whole trucks can be screened. You don't need to unload the cargo from trucks and then screen it one by one. You can screen in the whole truck in one go. So all this kind of mechanisms need to be put in place so that you ensure that narco trafficking and all these kind of things do not happen and the border remains open. Okay, the idea is not to fence the border, rather regulate the flow of goods and people. Okay, and that is there. So another challenge is how to maintain an open border while with Nepal, but at the same point of time ensure that it doesn't pose a major security challenge to India. That's, one could say, another major challenge in the India-Nepal relationship. Okay, so so you can write down about both the strengths and the challenges of the India-Nepal relationship. So, in terms of strengths, and challenges of the India-Nepal relationship, in terms of the strengths and challenges of the India-Nepal relationship, in terms of strengths, we argue that the strong people-to-people relations and the fact that a large number of Nepali citizens find employment. I told you more than 1.5 million find employment in India. These are what? The strengths of the India-Nepal relationship. The challenges, however, today are more than ever. First is that Nepal has, or the Nepali political elites have been more than willing to play the China card vis-a-vis India Nepali political elites have been more than willing to play the China card vis-a-vis India, and further have routinely sought to blame India for their own failure in addressing and further have routinely sought to blame India for their own failure in addressing Nepal's developmental challenges. And further have routinely sought to blame India for their own failure in addressing Nepal's developmental challenges. That's one. Meaning, why Nepal is not able to develop economically? That India doesn't allow Nepal to freely use its ports. Why Nepal is suffering from power? I'll explain to you the challenges in hydropower briefly. They say that major dam construction in Nepal has not happened because such a dam construction activity is largely going to benefit India, as I'll explain to you why they say so, and it is going to submerge portions of Nepal, and there have been disputes over how to share the cost of such projects also. Basically, the long and short of this is that neither hydropower has developed, and they say hydropower is also not developed because India is not a good developmental partner. Okay, so they say that, and further have routinely sought to blame India for their own failure in addressing the Nepal's developmental challenges. Secondly, Nepal's potential of Nepal's hydropower potential of generating 60,000 megawatts of electricity remains grossly underutilized or remains grossly under realized. Nepal's hydropower potential of generating 60,000 megawatts of electricity remains grossly under-realized. Most hydropower projects have been delayed due to multiple reasons. The chief being A, political instability in Nepal, B, A, political instability in Nepal, B, political instability in Nepal, B, disputes, or should we say disagreements between India and Nepal over cost sharing of projects, and C, that Nepal has argued that construction of dams on the rivers like Kosi, Mahakali, etc. would cause considerable displacement and environmental destruction in Nepal, whereas the benefits would be reaped. The benefits would be reaped chiefly by whom? India. In terms of irrigation, in terms of area under, in terms of area under irrigation coverage. So let me explain this particular point to you in a bit more detail. ये सिर्फ इसलिए समझा रहा हूं ताकि आपको एक ब्रॉड आइडिया होना चाहिए. आई एम टेलिंग यू मोस्ट डिटेल्स. सी एक चीज I'll be very honest in telling you is that most of us don't recognize what UPSC demands. For example, on the water dispute between India and Nepal, I can take one full class only on water dispute, talking about each of the dam projects and the cost involved there and the issues in the costing involved there and the displacements involved there. But UPSC will never ask such a question. So आपको मैं पहले ही बोल रहा हूँ, जो मैंने पहले लेक्चर में बोला था, if you know the syllabus, if you've seen the pattern of the question paper, then you know how much to focus on which topic. Because each of this, for example, hydropower can be taken and studied separately. When we used to study in SIS, तो हमारे प्रोफेसर थी, प्रोफेसर अमिता बत्रा, she used to teach Nepal for 10 lectures. पढ़ते रहो नेपाल, है ना. तो आप बोलेंगे सर नेपाल तो इतना सा कंट्री. So what I'm telling is university style preparation and exam oriented preparation is a very different thing. I had taken once a course on Latin America. For 6 months we studied Latin America, India Latin America relation. Okay. तो Latin America में आप पढ़ के क्या करेंगे? क्वेश्चन आता ही नहीं है. आता है तो एक क्वेश्चन आएगा, वो भी कभी कभार, राइट. तो उसको ब्रीफली कवर करना है. So what you should know is what is the demand of the exam. On that basis you go into depths. Otherwise it becomes a trivia class, है ना, कि यार जाए वहां क्या हो रहा है, वहां क्या हो रहा है, वहां क्या हो रहा है. Nobody will ask you that. Now to give you just a sense of what this dam construction issues are, including on the Pancheshwar Dam project, you know, the issue was this, and this issue has been this for a while, that look, Nepal is known for a large number of rivers crossing it. Now, on each of these rivers, please understand, Nepal is a upper riparian state or a lower riparian state? Upper riparian. Now, Nepal is a upper riparian state, so Nepal can construct dams on these rivers. Okay. Now, if Nepal constructs dams on these rivers, it can generate electricity and then it can sell it to, it can meet its own needs, it can sell it to India. What is the problem in constructing any big dam? Within India, one of the biggest dam projects was the Narmada Dam project. Okay. And that dam project itself became a matter of great controversy during the 1980s and 90s. Okay. And it led to a huge people's movement which was called the Narmada Bachao Andolan. Okay. And people like Medha Patkar and many others were associated with the Narmada Bachao Andolan. Okay, and why? Because when you construct a big dam, what problems does it cause? You have to store water. For storing water, basically a large number of villages or areas will be submerged. People living in that areas will be displaced, right? And basically, ultimately, so there is an environmental cost because the forest area, if there is any, will be submerged. Secondly, also it will displace a large number of people who were living in that area, were obtaining livelihood from that area. So there is a human cost of displacement, there is an environmental cost of submergence of forests, etc. There's a third cost, and that is the financial cost of constructing the project. So for constructing any of these projects, if Nepal was to do on some of the big rivers here, it will have to face some of the similar costs. Now, because in almost all these rivers, the dam construction has been proposed very, देखिए अभी इसमें इंडिया भी होशियारी है obviously, तो इसमें see who is going to finance the construction of these dams? Nepal alone will definitely not be in a position to go ahead and construct these dams or even finance the construction of these dams. Technical know-how is also required. So firstly, in most of the dam projects, for example, one which was proposed on Kosi or on Pancheshwar, the construction of dam is to be done by the Indian side. When, however, most of these dams will be constructed close to where? The India-Nepal border. Now, while these dams are constructed close to the India-Nepal border, they will be constructed on the Nepalese side, mostly. Like Pancheshwar is a dam which is actually going to be constructed somewhere here. It will cause some amount of flooding in the hill districts of Uttarakhand also, but it will chiefly cause larger amount of flooding in Nepal. So Nepal is like, we are the ones who are getting flooded. Now once the electricity is produced, the electricity will be either a portion of the electricity. Now these are often joint development projects, and in these joint venture projects what happens is that India will bear a part of the financial cost of the project and the other will be borne by Nepal. Okay. Now to be honest, India is not giving that favorable terms to Nepal on these projects like it gives to Bhutan. Okay, meaning for Bhutan they have given 60-70% fund of the project cost as a grant, but that is not the case often with Nepal based dams. For example, in the Pancheshwar dam, the cost sharing is decided on a 50-50 basis. Okay, so in the sense that India will bear a 50% cost and the Nepalese side will bear, but who is going to get chiefly flooded? Nepal. Now once the electricity gets produced, a portion of that electricity will come to India and the other will belong to Nepal, and Nepal can even sell that electricity to India or use it for its own consumption. Now here is Nepal's point. Nepal's point is that we bear not just the financial cost, we bear the humanitarian and the environmental cost of the project. Now when such projects are constructed close to border areas, why are, for example, if you look at the Narmada Dam itself, one of the chief uses of the Narmada Dam is what? देखिए आपको थोड़ा सा पता होना चाहिए और आप even in post independence history, I'll talk to you about the Narmada project briefly. It's one of the landmark environmental cum social movements of independent India. See, Narmada is a river. आप बोल रहे हैं सर नर्मदा क्यों पढ़ा रहे हैं, आप तो नेपाल पढ़ रहे हैं. देखिए जब आप पढ़ रहे हैं ना कुछ, तो कंसेप्चुअली अगर आप पढ़ेंगे यू विल ऑलवेज अंडरस्टैंड बेटर. Some Amarkantak hills and some things happen, and Narmada river comes from Madhya Pradesh into Gujarat. Where is the dam construction on the Narmada river largely? I'll give you this. पता ही नहीं आपको कुछ क्या है. ऐसे समझ लीजिए, देखिए the construction of the larger portions of the dam are in Madhya Pradesh. ठीक है, तो water storage and submergence of land is happening where? Madhya Pradesh. Now once the dam is constructed, that by the way the river is flowing right from east to west. Now once those dams are constructed, these dams are used not just for generating electricity, they are also used for irrigating land. Now that irrigating land, canals are constructed and land is irrigated. Now most of the land which is being irrigated from the Narmada Dam project is where? Gujarat. So who will support the project? Gujarat. And who will not be comfortable with the project? Similarly, if you look here, the dams are being constructed close to the Nepal border, but the irrigation, India-Nepal border, but in terms of the irrigation canals, the area irrigated by these dams is much larger on the Indian side as compared to the Nepali side. So Nepali side, see, irrigation में भी तुमको ज़्यादा फायदा हो रहा है और हमको कम फायदा हो रहा है. Now, what is India's response to all of these situations is that, look, without India's support, you will not be able to develop these dams. Yes, dams have to be built in your territory only. Why? Because you are the upper riparian state. And yes, you are going to bear a major part of the environmental cost. What India can do is, it can play a role in bearing the financial cost on a major scale if required. And secondly, what is to be understood is that by generating this electricity, Nepal is not doing India a favor. It is meeting its own needs, and the surplus it will sell to India, for which also it will make financial gains. So such projects are a win-win for both sides, though it can always be kept debating who's winning more. So it's a win-win project, but Nepal's point also I explained to you broadly. Now, with China coming into the picture, China has shown the interest in constructing some of these dam projects and has been given 4 of these dam projects also. The matter of the concern is that the Chinese are known for what? That speedy implementation, but there's always a possibility of debt trap. Secondly, there is another reason. What will Nepal do with the electricity that it generates? Please understand, the projects that China is going to fund for construction of these dams will also come at a financial cost. And if Nepal wants to recover a part of that financial cost by selling the electricity to whom? India. Is India bound to buy electricity from Nepal? No. India is like, बेच दो, तुमने जिससे बनवाया डैम उसी को बेच दो electricity. Will China buy electricity from Nepal? Khatam. The logic of geography. So India knows its cards, but there are issues. It's not that only Nepal is to be blamed for the lack of development in the hydropower sector. Any big infrastructure project is a challenging project to implement. Okay, even the Narmada project took more than 20 years to be implemented. Okay, it is went to the Supreme Court, fighting going on Supreme Court, PIL in Supreme Court, this happening, that happening. 30 years it took. Okay, PIL, Supreme Court issued stayed, World Bank withdrew funding, बहुत लड़ा हुआ उस पे. ठीक, ultimately it got constructed, but you see, that is a challenge when the 2 different states are on 2 different positions on the project. The central government is on a different position. That also took 20-30 years, and this is even the nature of complexity becomes even more because there's a China factor. You're dealing with 2 countries, and so on. So it is in the light of all of this that the hydropower potential also has not been realized as of now. So this is your point number 2. Is this clear? Right? Third, is the third major challenge is that while the open border between India and Nepal strengthens the people to people and economic linkages between strengthens the people to people and the economic linkages between India, Nepal, or sorry, between the two, it does pose serious, or it does pose, if not serious, significant security challenges as the open border can be used to fuel what? As the open border can be used to fuel insurgency, or sorry, to fuel terrorism, narco trafficking, human and arms smuggling. The challenge is to continue maintaining an open border between the two neighbors while doing what? While ensuring adequate surveillance adequate surveillance of cross-border movement of goods and people. While ensuring adequate surveillance of cross-border movement of goods and people. This is another challenge. The fourth is the, yes.
It's not directly related to those business. So when there are choices of such projects which are going to have mutual benefits for both the countries, and here if one of the major blocks is the financial block, so given that the project will take a lot of time, it's long-term project, it will take time to cover, and recovery will also take time. And but then the more you delay it, the more you are delaying the recovery as well. So isn't it more like more dimension to it? It does happen. But if you simplify it down, isn't it more sensible just to pay the extra money, get it started, and then leave the benefit over a period of time in terms of social and financial benefits?
So who should pay the money? India. Yeah.
Because
So basically, what you're asking is ki, while we understand that all these big projects come with significant cost and time outlays, but if we understand that, that in the long term, such projects are likely to whom? Benefit India, then India can bear a major part of the cost of the project and go ahead and implement the projects.
Something very similar to what we do with fiscal policy. Like we have a fiscal deficit today to stimulate the economy and benefit later.
So how you do it is another matter. It can be, whether you do it through loans or through grants or a mix of both. That is a detail which can always be worked out. But this point about, that when it comes to dealing with India's smaller South Asian neighbors, India should be willing to take the first step. India should be willing to go the extra mile to go ahead and complete these projects, because by completing such projects and ensuring a completion of such projects, India will ensure better relations with its neighbors that will benefit India in the long term. And for that, India doesn't need to do what? India doesn't need to wait for a reciprocity, or doesn't need to wait for quid pro quo, that only when you bear 50% cost, we'll bear the 50% cost. This idea has already been talked about and was even proposed by I.K. Gujral, who was the previous foreign minister also, then went on to be briefly the prime minister of the country also, called as a part of the Gujral Doctrine. Now, when we'll talk about the Gujral Doctrine says something to this effect. It says that it is in the interest of India to accommodate what? Its smaller South Asian neighbors and their concerns, whether that's a Nepal or a Bhutan or a Bangladesh or a Sri Lanka. Why? Because once their concerns, if and when are accommodated, then there will be all the reason for these countries to have closer cooperation with India. And that will ensure that India will have a peaceful periphery. This peaceful periphery is very important for India if India needs to play a larger role at the global stage. मैं आपके पॉइंट को और आगे ले जा रहा हूं, ठीक है? Why should we be doing this? Why should we cater to the demands of Nepal or Bhutan or Bangladesh? Can we afford to ignore them? Yes, we can. If China would not have been there, we have been ignoring them for a long time. But even if the China factor is taken out for a minute, and even if we keep this China factor aside for a minute, the fact remains that if India faces a situation where, देखिए एकदम सिंपल, मैं बार बार लोगों को समझाता हूं, जब आपने बांग्लादेश पढ़ा हो सकता है you may not have studied it like this, but I'll explain it in one line. India has a lot of issues with Pakistan. After Pakistan in 1971, you have the creation of Bangladesh. Today, does Bangladesh pose any major security challenges of the nature that Pakistan poses to India? No. Imagine having India being surrounded by Pakistan on west also and Pakistan on east also. The creation of Bangladesh is a huge strategic advantage for India, because now we have ensured that we don't have hostile neighbors on both the sides. So partly the 1971 victory has ensured at least a certain degree of semblance and normalcy on India's border in the east, which is a long and porous border bordering India's northeastern states, etc., etc. And so that we don't have the headache of dealing with another Pakistan on the east, like we have on the west. Now, if you see, but there is insurgency which partly comes, even the Ulfa insurgency finds refuge in Bangladesh. Or if you have Bhutan, if you have Nepal, if you address their concerns and they have closer relations with India, then India will have less distractions to face, so that it can face the real challenge. Who's the real challenge? China. Otherwise, yahan Doklam bhi manage ho raha hai. Or in case of Nepal, as we'll see, there is the Kala Pani and the Lipu Lake issue. Or in case of Bangladesh, there are other issues. Or in case of Sri Lanka, there is the LTT and all that, or the Sri Lankan issue. India, if needs to play a larger role at the world level, it needs to ensure that it doesn't waste its time and energy on, it doesn't waste its political time and energy on dealing with smaller neighbors and smaller issues. अरे क्या फर्क पड़ रहा है, काला पानी उनका हो या हमारा हो, इससे कोई, it is not the real issue. The real issue is China. Right? So Gujral Doctrine says that in the interest of India's larger objective of playing a major role in South Asia and at the global stage, it is important that India adopts a position where it goes ahead and makes, unidirectional concessions to its smaller neighbors and addresses those issues. But अगर ये आपने कर भी दिया, then also the problem is that for implementation of these projects, it's not just that the financial cost is there or the Indian attitude is, or there is poor implementation from India's side. As you see in case of Nepal, there is a constant habit on the Nepali side also to not go ahead with the completion of many of these projects. And that is something which is a problem. In case of Bangladesh, for example, when you see, while the Sheikh Hasina government has largely been willing to have closer cooperation with India, the opposition in Bangladesh of Sheikh Hasina's has often been of the, which is the BNP, the Bangladesh National Party. एक तो Awami League है, एक BNP है. So the BNP has often been of the opinion that it doesn't want closer cooperation with India. So it's not that just if India adopts an attitude as proposed by the Gujarat Doctrine, it will solve India's problems with its periphery, because the domestic politics of India's neighbors also complicates the implementation of these projects. However, that is a worthwhile idea which has been proposed time and again, that India should adopt a more relaxed attitude in terms of accommodating the demands of its smaller South Asian neighbors, so that it doesn't have to waste its time and energy. For example, with Bangladesh, there was a maritime dispute. था, जैसे आपने पढ़ाओ नहीं पढ़ाओ कोई बात नहीं. The maritime dispute with Bangladesh over the maritime boundary between India and Bangladesh and over fishing rights between the two. Bangladesh took the matter to the International Court for Justice, the ICJ, over this maritime dispute. India lost the case. India, but willingly said, okay, we will abide by the treaty. Okay, now we will abide by the ICC's verdict. Let Bangladesh have the fisheries and whatever resources come from there. Let's not get involved in useless controversies, because politicians on either side will always keep saying, "Arey, how are you ceding our rights to the neighbor?" But in the interest of the larger relationship, you go ahead and accommodate their concern. The same on Teesta. It has been said कि भाई India has said that Bangladesh has said that it is a litmus test of India and Bangladesh relationship. What? Teesta water sharing agreement. Now, there are some concerns in Sikkim and some in the northern portions of West Bengal, or God knows what is the concern of Mamata Banerjee, because from 2010, when she was a part of the UPA regime, to 2022, she has been single-handedly saying no to Teesta agreement. And the lack of closure on the Teesta agreement has prevented further deepening of India-Bangladesh relationship. Mind you, a closer cooperation with Bangladesh has huge potential benefits for whom? India. And so if we make those concessions on Teesta, it will have positive impact on India-Bangladesh relationship in so many other areas. Okay, but that has been missing. So the Gujarat Doctrine would say, go ahead and give them what they want, so that it will deepen cooperation in other areas, keeping the larger objective of Indian foreign policy in mind. So that's that. Okay, so chaliye. So if you are clear with this, then the next point is the border issue between India and Nepal, and that is on the issue of yes. It in the light of India-Nepal relationship, the dam construction is not moving ahead because Nepal doesn't give the due recognition to India. See, India doesn't need recognition. Firstly, is a very abstract word. What does it mean? What does recognition mean? pestering India. See, these are all words. They should stop pestering India, recognition. The heart of the matters are these. That who is going to pay the cost? Where is the environment? How does it impact their domestic politics? Okay. And now also the China factor. Kya kaha, kya suna is all rhetoric. Okay, I told you, the same Kathmandu elites one day would burn the Indian flag, the other day would raise the Indian flag and thank Indian flag. Right? So it depends on the context. It depends on the politics. Ye shabd kaha suni, haath milana, gale milna, right? This is all rhetoric. For example, we say majority population, there is Hindu, here is also Hindu, there is so much Hindu. Where is Hindu in India-Nepal relations? There is. Sir. So what I'm trying to say is that there is a certain element of what is to be understood is core interests rather than what is being said. Okay. So basically the challenge is to okay, so let me give you that another context, and that is on this, the fourth point that I wanted to, I've given that in the map there. Sorry. You have this map, right? In this, there is the Kala Pani map. देखिए, now when you look at this particular map, the Kala Pani issue, ये जो देखिए, the boundary between India and Nepal is on the western front is partly contested in the sense that the Treaty of Sogoli, which was signed in 1816 period between British India and Nepal, said that the boundary between British India and Nepal is the Kali River. ठीक है, so the Kali River is the river which separates India and Nepal. Now that is something which is agreed upon. The question is, where does the Kali River originate? Okay, Nepal says that the Kali River originates from the Lipu Lake Pass, because the tributary comes from there, and the the Lipu Lake Pass or the Limpu Darya Pass, it's one and the same thing. They say that the Kali River originates from the Lipu Lake Pass or the Limpu Darya Pass. Not the Lipu Lake Pass, the Limpu Darya Pass. Whereas India says that the Kali River chiefly originates from Lipu Lake. So both agree that the boundary is the Kali River. The question is, where does it originate? The eastern pass or the western pass? Okay. Now, the Indian side says it originates here. The Nepalese side says it originates here. Now, this has been a topic of, and this is a zoomed in of this particular area, that silver of land. ये आप देख रहे हैं जो इसी का zoomed in है वो, that triangular area. Now this is also a tri-junction area between whom? India, China and Nepal. Now the thing about the Lipu Lake Pass is that up till the Lipu Lake Pass, even in the 1962 war, Indian troops were placed at the Lipu Lake Pass because the Chinese troops can walk in from here. Okay, I'm just giving you the context. And an alternative route for the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra also goes from here. Okay, goes from here. Now, alternative route to the which route? I told you the route which goes through Sikkim. Remember, I told you yesterday that the current route goes through Sikkim, but there's the alternative route to go to the Kailash Mansarovar. And India has gone ahead and done road construction in this region. Highway or border highways construction in this region. Now, Nepal has not raised the Kala Pani issue for the first time now. It was raised in 2000s also, early 2000 when Vajpayee was a prime minister. It was raised briefly before that also. So it's not that they're suddenly raising it today, but time and again it gets raised. Okay. The timing partly tells you something. Okay. Ki between 2000s to 2017, 18, it was largely silent. And after that, it has again resurged. Why after 2017? पहले तो कौन? Oli. KP Oli became the prime minister again. KP Oli, Communist Party, China links, this, that, all of that. That's one reason. Secondly, you have seen what China and Nepal's increasing cooperation on the Belt and Road Initiative. I told you about also the Nepal's blockade by the Madhesi blockade after 2015, the coming of Oli to power, increasing China-Nepal cooperation and Belt and Road Initiative. And you see, after Doklam, you see that they've raised this, this issue again in Nepali domestic politics. KP Oli was accused partly by the opposition that it is giving away Nepal's land to India. KP Oli said, "Aise kaise giving away Nepal's land?" Okay, so this area has been a matter of some dispute. When Nepal expressed its strong opposition to India's road construction, where along the Kalapani in this region, India made a statement and Jaishankar made a statement that Nepal, it seems, is making claims on someone else's behest. Who's someone else? Okay. So this is practically not a very big issue as far as who's concerned, India and Nepal. But again, this is a tri-junction area which has a strategic significance because the Chinese troops can walk in here. And India, that is why, has gone ahead and done road construction and troop patrolling in this region also. And that is why you see it is of certain strategic concern to India. It is not so much of a concern to Nepal. It's not that a large amount of Nepali population lives here. In fact, it is adjacent to the Pithoragarh district and it is largely the Indian population which lives there. So it's not that much of a concern for Nepal, but Nepali politicians have made it a point to make it a national issue in Nepal. See, आप में तो किसी प्रॉब्लम ही नहीं हुआ सुनने में ये. Let me tell you a different story. India and China, right? And comes where Aksai Chin. देखिए, अभी अक्साई चिन की एक strategic significance है to India, but if you look at this, just जो मैंने आपको बोला था कि China had said to India कि भाई China had said to India that you give away claims on Aksai Chin, and in 1961-62 China said that you give up claims on Aksai Chin, we will give up claims on northeast Arunachal Pradesh region, and in the Aksai Chin region you give up claims. And they said, and did India give up the claims? No. A point was raised in the Indian Parliament. This matter was discussed in the Indian Parliament in 61, and it was said that that nobody lives in the Aksai Chin region. It is a cold desert. It is a deserted area. It is a desert, meaning it receives no rainfall, extreme cold temperature. Nobody lives there, neither Indian nor Chinese. So we can give it to the Chinese. So the Home Minister of Mr. Nehru said, my head is also bald, nothing grows here, you give this also to the Chinese. Right? Why was China so keen about having Aksai Chin, and which people do not, maybe most, I'm not saying that we should give Aksai Chin to China. Pata chala, disclaimer, I'm not saying we should give Aksai Chin to China. आजकल ये भी अब चालू करना. But what I'm saying is that this is what was being discussed there. China has been bent on Aksai Chin for a long time. because it is central to their one China policy. The Xinjiang region and the Tibet region are connected most. देखिए हमें वैसे अपनी ज्योग्राफी नहीं पता तो इनकी तो क्या ही पता होगी, right? So what is not understood is that mainland China is connected to Tibet only through Aksai Chin. It is at a height of 8,000 feet. ठीक है, more than 8,000 feet. So there is no road that you can build from here. The only way is to come from Aksai Chin into Xinjiang and from Xinjiang into Aksai Chin into Tibet. If they want to move troops through land into Tibet. So that is why they want Aksai Chin, because it helps them consolidate their hold over Tibet. Okay. Now, so what I'm trying to say is that at times, and the Chinese made a similar offer, you give us this, we give up claims there. But often such matters get engulfed in domestic politics, and that is a big determinant. Now, I'm not saying India was as irrational in not giving up Aksai Chin as the Nepalese are irrational in making the Kalapaniya issue. But I'm just telling that it is domestic politics complicates matter. There is a certain amount of significance of Aksai Chin to India, which is not more so with respect to China, but it is actually more so with respect to Pakistan. कितना आपको बताएं, फिर बता देते थोड़ा सा. यहाँ क्या है? ये ऐसे, हाँ, ये क्या है? POK. And यहाँ है Islamabad, right? Now, and this is your Gilgit-Baltistan region. This is POK. अगर आप ढंग से कभी देखें तो हमेशा इंडियन डॉक्यूमेंट्स मेंशन गिलगित बाल्टिस्तान सेपरेटली एंड पीओके सेपरेटली. ओके, दे आर नॉट मेंशन्ड इन द सेम ब्रेथ बिकॉज पीओके का पार्ट नहीं है गिलगित बाल्टिस्तान. ओके, सो बट लॉन्ग स्टोरी कट शॉर्ट, इंडियाज कंसर्न इज दिस दैट इफ यहां क्या है छोटू सा, वहीं जहां हमारे जवान लड़ रहे हैं, तो क्योंकि हमें हमेशा बताया था कि सियाचिन पे हमारे जवान लड़ रहे हैं, तो दिस इज देयर. नाउ इट इज इन दिस कॉन्टेक्स्ट द इंडियाज कंसर्न इज दिस दैट इफ द चाइनीज टेक अक्साई चिन and the Pakistanis are already present in Gilgit-Baltistan and POK, and if they carry out, if both sides decide to carry out a coordinated attack, or even if Pakistan tries to carry out a coordinated attack, they can wipe out the whole region going east up till Aksai Chin. Or if both sides launch a coordinated attack, India will lose the complete control of the region, which is a nightmare. So that is why it's not that India doesn't have concerns on Aksai Chin, but there are concerns on Aksai Chin. But what I'm trying to tell you is that giving up claims on territory often is not very easy to do. Why? Because it often gets involved in domestic politics. Okay, and there, though, everybody is making a living about talking about that how the ruling party is selling Nepal's interests to India. So no Mr. Oli is ever going to give up on what? The Lipu Lake or the Limpu Darya claims, even though they are not a very big, they are not of a very big strategic significance to whom? Nepal. But it does fuel anti-India sentiments in Nepal, that India is encroaching on Nepal's territory, India is building roads in Nepal. Okay, India is being the big brother. Okay, so that's the, if you could say, the last major challenge. So the ongoing, you can write, the ongoing the ongoing tensions between India and Nepal over the Kalapani, Limpu Darya, Lipu Lake, Tri-Junction, has complicated the relationship as the KP Oli government has been vocal about the KP Oli government has been vocal about its claims on the region and on its claims on the region. Further, Nepal has objected to Indian road construction Nepal has objected where? To Indian road construction. Nepal has objected to the Indian road construction in or around Kalapani, leading up to the strategically important Tri-Junction area between India, China and Nepal. Between India, China and Nepal. So what is the way forward? When we talk about the way forward, one can always mention in way forward certain positive steps which have been taken in the recent past. तो IR के आंसर में वे फॉरवर्ड में आपको कोई नया चमत्कार नहीं प्रपोज करना है कि मेरे हिसाब से ये होना चाहिए. आपका हिसाब नहीं मैटर करता है. ठीक है. What you need to write always in a way forward are some of the recent steps taken by the governments or some of the recent steps proposed or in discussion at the highest levels. Nothing more than that. ठीक है. Because the question में हमेशा दिल से so in your opinion, अगर कोई भी क्वेश्चन चालू हो इन शब्दों से, इन योर ओपिनियन, शुरू में, आखिरी में, बीच में, योर ओपिनियन डज नॉट मैटर. ओनली व्हाट मैटर्स इज व्हाट हैज बीन सेड बाय सब्जेक्ट एक्सपर्ट्स ऑन दैट पर्टिकुलर टॉपिक और व्हाट हैज बीन सेड बाय एनी गवर्नमेंट और गवर्नमेंट कमिटी रिपोर्ट. इन योर व्यू, व्हाट स्टेप्स मस्ट बी टेकन टू टैकल कंजेशन इन अर्बन स्पेसेस इन इंडिया? योर व्यू मस्ट बी बेस्ड ऑन, पता चला आपका व्यू मस्ट नॉट बी व्हाट्सएप बेस्ड व्यू. व्हाट कि ये बैन कर दो, वो बैन कर दो. बैन करो योजना इज नॉट कॉल्ड योजना. ओके, सो इसको रोक दो, उसको रोक दो. ऑड इवन केजरीवाल. देखिए, पॉलिटिशियंस कम इन ऑल शेप्स एंड साइजेस एंड देयर आर सम पॉलिटिशियंस व्हिच कैन बी टॉक्ड अबाउट फ्रीली इन दिस कंट्री. वन इज मिस्टर मनमोहन सिंह, अदर इज केजरीवाल. इनके बारे में आप कुछ भी बोल लीजिए, कोई कुछ नहीं करेगा. ठीक है. केजरीवाल इंट्रोड्यूस ऑड एंड इवन. इससे क्या कम होगा? पोल्यूशन. आया न्यूज, इंडिया इज नहीं, दिल्ली इज मोस्ट पोल्यूटेड सिटी. ये एक लाइन में पिछले 10 साल से पढ़ रहा हूं. चाहे शीला दीक्षित थी, चाहे केजरीवाल. पेड़ पे पानी डालेंगे, इससे पोल्यूशन कम हो जाएगा. स्मॉग टावर बना देंगे, उससे पोल्यूशन कम हो जाएगा. ऑड इवन कर देंगे, उससे पोल्यूशन कम हो जाएगा. हो गया कम? होना ही नहीं है कम. So politicians have this habit, that they will often propose solutions which seem to be solutions, but they are not solutions. आप आधी कार आज चलाओ, आधी कार कल चलाओ, इससे एयर पोल्यूशन खत्म हो जाएगा. This is not, but तो दो लोगों ने बोला, there are केजरीवाल सपोर्टर्स, तो क्या हुआ? ट्रैफिक तो कम हुआ. कोई कुछ कर रहा है, आपको उसमें भी प्रॉब्लम है. A policy is meant to achieve a purpose. If it doesn't achieve the purpose it was intended to be, it is a policy failure. It doesn't matter that the policy has unintended positive consequences. है ना? तो policies must be designed to achieve a objective and that objective must be achieved. If it doesn't, so way forward में भी आप जब भी mention करें specific measures which either have been taken or are proposed. So in terms of way forward, if you look that and I've given this in the handout, so I'm not going to write this in detail, but the recent completion of the Amlekhaganj Birganj pipeline, oil pipeline, which has a capacity of oil pipeline. This was completed in 2019. Prime Minister Modi and KP Oli both inaugurated this. It has a capacity of something around 2 million cubic feet of, carrying 2 million cubic feet of oil on a regular basis. Pipelines are always cheaper than container movement. Secondly, it ensures uninterrupted flow so that if there is a Madhesi blockade or any blockade in Terai in the future, it doesn't disrupt the flow of oil. It's a step in the right direction. Okay. Secondly, there has been recent studies or there have been viability studies have been recently completed on linking whom? Kathmandu and Raxaul through a what? Rail link. No. And now it must be speedily what? Implemented. So rail link हमें बनाना होगा, we shouldn't wait for whom? The Chinese to do rail construction. Thirdly, for people to people, there can be more focus on which tourism? Buddhist circuit tourism, connecting Bodh Gaya to Lumbini. Lumbini birthplace, Bodh Gaya, enlightenment. ठीक, बहुत मजा आएगा जब हम पढ़ेंगे एंशिएंट इंडिया. ठीक है. In Jainism, there is one philosophy which is called Anekant-vada philosophy. Anekant-vada. This is a philosophy of Jainism which says reality is complex. Reality is complex and understanding a complex reality is a Herculean task. No one person can understand reality and its complexity very easily. It is not in the measure of most people to understand all the dimensions of a reality which is by its nature complex. ये होती है एक अनेकांत वदा फिलॉसफी. आपने लगा था फिर कर रहे हैं क्या बकवास. ये क्वेश्चन पहले भी आया हुआ है, आगे भी आएगा, है ना. या मैं क्यों बता रहा हूं? देयर आर मेनी stories, movies today which often talk about reality and say that our version of reality is the only version of reality. It is nothing but fact and truth, but absolute truth. अनेकांत वदा फिलॉसफी. इतना कॉन्फिडेंस, जैसे मैं देखता हूं आज किसी से भी आप किसी भी मुद्दे पे बात करिए, फुल कॉन्फिडेंस. जो मुझे पता है यही सत्य है, पूरा सत्य है, इसके अलावा सत्य है ही नहीं. अनेकांत वदा फिलॉसफी का 180 डिग्री ऑपोजिट, राइट. So what does this philosophy teach you? If you imbibe this philosophy, it teaches you to be open to other ideas and not get into a mindset whether what you know is the absolute truth. Okay, it doesn't mean that what you know is a lie, but it does tell you that there can be other aspects about that same reality that you are unaware of. इसके लिए एक बड़ी अच्छी एग्जाम्पल दी जाती है जैनिज्म में. Elephant, blind. There is an elephant, and all of us, elephant is a vast, and all of us are blind or blindfolded. And when you touch the elephant, somebody may touch the trunk, another person may touch the tail. The one who is perceiving the tail of the elephant is also perceiving a part of the reality. It's not that वो tail नहीं है. The one who is perceiving the trunk is also perceiving a part of the reality. So you and me will disagree. You will say, sir, elephant has trunk. I'll say, chodo, elephant has tail. It is quite much possible that we are only all perceiving a part of that reality, and in reality it may have either both or even a mixture of those. So Anekantada philosophy tells you, do not get too arrogant about what you know. Okay? खैर, लेकिन ये सब बातें अगर आज आप किसी से करेंगे तो फिर लोग बोलेंगे सब बकवास. Speedy implementation of the project must be ensured, and thirdly, the ongoing hydropower projects must be completed. एक last point है जो I have not told you is the revision of the ongoing hydropower projects must be completed. The last point is, which is often said, is about what? The revision of the India-Nepal Friendship Treaty. देखिए हमने बोला था India-Bhutan Friendship Treaty was revised in 2007, but India-Nepal Friendship Treaty has not been revised. Okay, and there has been a demand from Nepal to revise the treaty. ठीक है. In 2008, a committee was appointed by both the sides, an eminent persons group, eminent experts group. In 2008, it was appointed. It submitted its report. फिर क्या हुआ उस report का हमें नहीं पता. Then new government came on both sides, and they again appointed a committee, which has again submitted it to the government to revise the treaty. However, the treaty is yet to be revised. Nepal says it is not getting what? That its citizens do not get reciprocal treatment, or what we call as national treatment in India. Okay. They have some useless concerns with the treaty. This treaty is heavily inveighed in favor of Nepal. देखिए, actually इस treaty में क्या लिखा है कि both sides must treat each other's citizens in equally and must provide opportunity for residence and employment. But Nepal since 1960s has imposed increasing conditions under which Indians cannot find employment or settle down easily in Nepal. But Nepali citizens continue to do so. But India has not really objected also. ठीक है, देखिए एकदम सिंपल. क्यों भाई? If Indians get the opportunity to buy property in Nepal, खरीद देंगे पूरा नेपाल. प्लॉट ही प्लॉट. If you go to Himachal Pradesh, can you buy? No. If you go to certain portions in Uttarakhand also, it's limited, but in Uttarakhand it's way more liberal, but in Himachal Pradesh you cannot buy. In many of the states in Northeast India, you cannot buy what? Land, right? Because there's always this concern that these areas, topography or demography may undergo significant change if such steps are allowed. So it was understood by India कि भाई why Nepal's concerns are there and they want to restrict the ability of Indians to buy property in Nepal. So that is there. Now it is in this context. Now while all of this has happened, Nepal also has concerns about what? The arms treaty. I told you, right, that if Nepal has to buy arms from third countries, it must seek permission from India or inform India. But in 87, when Nepal bought arms from China, it did so without informing or taking any permission from India and violated the treaty also. What happened? Nothing happened. And since then, twice or thrice, in 2005-06 also, they again bought arms. And India again did not supply. So they violated the treaty twice or thrice also. So India is like, anyways, they violate Article 5 of the treaty, which imposes this condition on them. So if they want that to be taken away, so be it. निकाल लो, वैसे भी तुम कौन सा मानते हो, right? So by and large, India is ready to accommodate almost all of the concerns, and that is why Shyam Saran said that India must accommodate whatever concerns are on the Nepali side. Okay, and that is why the report has been submitted to both the sides. And sooner or later, when the time is right, when both the politicians on both the sides feel that they have some political points to earn, they'll probably go ahead and sign a revised friendship treaty. और फिर आप न्यूज़पेपर में पढ़ेंगे, अब it will bring a new dawn in India-Nepal relationship. It will be just another dawn, because this is not going to change. So the way forward is also to revise the India-Nepal friendship treaty in the light of concerns expressed by both sides. In the light of, and I've given this in the handout. Handout is complementary to whatever I'm saying. उसमें कुछ चीजें हैं जो I have not discussed in the class, तो आप पढ़ लीजिए. In the light of concerns expressed by both sides. Done. चलिए नेक्स्ट लेट्स गो टू अफगानिस्तान. ये वो कंट्री है जो क्या कंट्री है, राइट? अफगानिस्तान को पढ़ने का थोड़ा अप्रोच हम अलग रखेंगे. आई होप दिस मच इज क्लियर. अफगानिस्तान को पढ़ने का अप्रोच इसलिए बिकॉज वी आर ओनली गोइंग टू, आई विल बी वेरी ऑनेस्ट, टेक अ वेरी लिमिटेड व्यू ऑफ अफगानिस्तान. ओके, अफगानिस्तान का आप इतिहास पढ़ेंगे तो बड़ा रोचक इतिहास है अफगानिस्तान का, एंड बहुत ही इट्स सुपर इंटरेस्टिंग. बट फ्रॉम द पर्पज ऑफ आवर एग्जाम वी, देखिए इंडिया अफगानिस्तान की कहानियां तो एक से एक हैं. मतलब firstly, most Indians do not understand why Afghanistan is important to India. तो पहला तो हमें जो पढ़ना है वो यही है, what is the importance of India-Afghanistan relationship. India-Afghan relationship. Secondly, the next major thing is a brief historical background. अब ये यहाँ पे जब हम historical context of अफगानिस्तान की बात कर रहे हैं तो हम बहुत ही छोटा सा पीरियड कवर करेंगे, between 1979 to 2020, और इसमें भी focus will be from 2000 to 2020. Then the third will be the implications of US withdrawal from Afghanistan, the implications of US withdrawal from Afghanistan, and also India's interventions or actions in Afghanistan. Implication of US withdrawal from Afghanistan for whom? India-Afghanistan relationship. That's all that we are interested in. Okay. तो ये 3-4 चीजें ही मेजरली पढ़नी है. I'll give you a handout for India-Afghanistan as well. देखिए, how important is India, how important is Afghanistan for India? To understand it, you should know that one thing that will make you understand is anyway something, one incident that everybody has heard about at least to some extent, and that is what? The Kandahar hijack, right? The IC-814, the Kandahar hijack of 1998, where flight from Nepal to Delhi was hijacked and taken to Afghanistan. In return, they demanded the release of 4 leaders of the Jaish-e-Mohammed, including Masood Azhar, which India released in return for the safe passage of the Indian passengers aboard the Air India flight. Right? Ultimately, this happened, and matter was sorted out for then in 1998. That hijack happened in air, obviously, but the plane was taken to Afghanistan. It was not taken to Pakistan. Okay, it's taken to Afghanistan, refueled in Amritsar, taken to Afghanistan, etc., but not taken to Pakistan. Okay, and Pakistan said, "Arey nahi, हमने तो नहीं कराया." Okay, so that is there, but that's one significance of what? Afghanistan, that it can be used as a base for fueling terror activities against whom? India. Okay, that's one thing. जो एक इस incident से you can understand. But there is way more depth to the India-Afghan relationship. One country on whose development India has spent the most is Afghanistan. More than $2 billion India spent on the reconstruction activities in Afghanistan. No other country has received this kind of humanitarian assistance from India. Okay, so that is there. So why is it? Is it only for terrorism related activities? Then you are grossly mistaken. Terrorism से लड़ने के लिए सिर्फ अफगानिस्तान पे फोकस नहीं है. Afghanistan is extremely important because it is India's possible trump card against whom? सेंट्रल एशिया. तब तो ठीक है, ऊपर ऊपर वाली बातें हैं, कनेक्टिविटी टू सेंट्रल एशिया. वो क्या कनेक्टिविटी देंगे जिनकी खुद कनेक्टिविटी नहीं है? मैं आपको बता रहा हूं, ये सारे पॉइंट्स हैं लिखने के लिए. टेररिज्म, कनेक्टिविटी टू सेंट्रल एशिया. मुद्दा इज पाकिस्तान. ओके, फॉर पाकिस्तान द वर्स्ट नाइटमेयर इज इंडिया अफगानिस्तान relationship. So I'm first explaining to you the strategic significance of India-Afghanistan relationship. And if you look at Pakistan, and Afghanistan, then okay, and I'll show you an exact map in a bit. But if you look at this, the context is this, that if India and Afghanistan have good relations, have India and Afghanistan in the past, have they shared good relations? पता ही नहीं है क्या. India and Afghanistan in the past have shared good relations. In the future, if India and Afghanistan do share good relations, if the government in Afghanistan and the government in India have good relations, it's a nightmare for Pakistan. Why? I'll tell you why. Because firstly, Afghanistan and Pakistan have border disputes over what? The Durand line. The Durand line is apparently the line which separates Afghanistan from Pakistan, passing through the west of the important city of Peshawar. The northwest frontier province में Peshawar है, and passing west of Peshawar is the Durand Line. The Durand Line, drawn somewhere around 1893, is considered as the line separating Pakistan and Afghanistan. Afghanistan doesn't recognize the Durand Line. Say, hai nahi ye to border. And Peshawar is a part of Afghanistan. Peshawar is the land of Pashtuns. Pashtuns are the dominant ethnic community in Afghanistan, and Peshawar thus belongs to Afghanistan, though it is currently in Pakistan. So just to give you that context also, that the Pashtuns are the dominant ethnic community here. Abdul Ghaffar Khan or Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, the freedom fighter, whatever, Frontier Gandhi, Northwest Frontier Province. But the important context is he was a Pashtun. Born a Pashtun, he often supported the idea of a unified India and all that. ठीक है. After his death, he is buried where? In Afghanistan. More than 3 lakh people attended his funeral, which was conducted in Afghanistan. He is a prominent Pashtun leader, but he was born in Peshawar. So, what I'm trying to tell you is that the ethnic Pashtun presence is strong in Peshawar. They anyways consider that the Durand Line is nothing but a abstract line drawn by the British, imposed on the Afghans, and the Afghans never recognized the Durand Line. एक तो ये context हो गया. Now the fear of Pakistan is this, that if there is a bonhomie between the Indian and the Afghan rulers, then Afghanistan can pose a security challenge to Pakistan from the west, India can pose a challenge from the east, and Pakistan will be facing what? A double front, or will be forced to be ready for a possible two-front war, or even if a possible two-front war doesn't happen simultaneously, Pakistan will be forced to divert its resources for guarding both the western and the eastern border. Pakistan doesn't want a situation like this, where it has to deploy troops on the western border also and the eastern border also. Okay. On the contrary, because that means what? That if they have to deploy troops on the western border, then they will be able to focus less or more on the eastern border. Less. When it comes to on the Kashmir question or on their claims on Kashmir, etc., they will be able to deploy limited number of their military resources if they have to deploy it on the Afghan border as well. So they want peace on the Afghan border. And that peace they feel will never come as long as the Afghan government has close relations with whom? India. That's one context. Flip it to the other side. Pakistan on the other side believes that if Pakistan has a dominant control over the Afghan government, then it can be Pakistan's what? One is safe haven for training terrorists and launching attacks into India, whether in Jammu and Kashmir or elsewhere in India. That's one. Second, suppose India and Pakistan do have a major military conflict and Pakistan loses control of Islamabad or Lahore or Karachi, their major cities. यही हैं, 3-4 ही हैं. ठीक है. Islamabad, Lahore, Karachi. Suppose they lose control of these cities. For example, you look what? Ukraine. If Ukraine loses control of Kyiv, Kharkiv and all that. So if Pakistan loses control of these major cities to India in a major war with India, then its troops can fall back on the Afghan border, regroup here and launch a counter strike again. So Pakistan uses this term. Afghanistan provides Pakistan strategic depth. Strategic depth, because Pakistan does not have strategic depth. I told you, Lahore is some 80 kilometers from Amritsar. Islamabad is some 150 kilometers from Indian portions of Kashmir, which can be covered in a couple of days. So they don't have depth to fall back on if their major cities are occupied. ठीक है. So for that depth, they need good relations with whom? Afghanistan. So that if Indian troops do capture Islamabad or Lahore or Karachi, then the Pakistani troops can rely on and fall back on the Afghan-Pakistan border and then regroup here and then launch a counter offensive again. So they want strategic depth, and who can provide them strategic depth? Good relations with Afghanistan. Good relations with Afghanistan is a fancy way of saying that if Pakistan can control, who rules Afghanistan? यही तो हुआ ना गुड रिलेशन का. आपको क्या लगा गुड रिलेशन का मतलब यही है शब्द. दैट इज व्हाई आई एम सेइंग recognition, respect, regard, these are words, and in the language of IR what they mean depends on the context. Okay, so the context is this, that Pakistan sees Afghanistan as a way of increasing its strategic depth vis-a-vis India. India sees potentially close relations with Afghanistan as a way of containing Pakistan. ठीक है, ये एक ब्रॉडर सिक्योरिटी और स्ट्रेटेजिक कॉन्टेक्स्ट है. बाकी ये कनेक्टिविटी टू सेंट्रल एशिया तो है. टू गिव यू दिस कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑल्सो, बट when I told that there have been good relations between Indian and Afghan government, Hamid Karzai studied in India. Hamid Karzai, the ex-Afghan, studied in India. He did spend some part of his study time also in JNU. मेरा प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, उनका प्रॉब्लम है ना. I am out of JNU. I disown my own past. को बात नहीं, अभी यहाँ रहना है तो फिर है ना, तो ठीक है. तो that's one example. Najibullah's, as I'll explain to you the brief history. In the early 1990s, the Afghan government was headed by Mr. Najibullah. Najibullah was eventually assassinated and hanged by the Taliban in Kabul, but his family stays in Delhi. A large number of Afghans come to India for treatment, medical tourism. So whether it is in higher education, a large number of the senior military personnel of Afghanistan are trained by India. Since 2000, India has also supplied some India has also supplied some military equipment to the Afghan government. India has built the Afghan parliament. India has built the Salma Dam. India has built the Dilaram Zaranj highway. So India has done a lot of construction activity, including big construction projects in Afghanistan. So, and also a number of Afghan political elites have either studied in India, or they stay in India, or their family members stay in India. What it does tell you is that there is a considerable degree of potential for closer cooperation between India and Afghanistan. Afghanistan signed its first strategic partnership with which country? India. It did not sign it first with Pakistan. Afghanistan said our potential strategic partner and friend in South Asia is India. When who was ruling? The Hamid Karzai government. तो ये सारी बात किसको चुभ रही है? Afghan people don't go for treatment to Pakistan, they come to India. They don't go for education to Pakistan, they come to India. Right? So what I'm trying to tell you is this, that there is a huge significance of this relationship. That is why the government has put in the time, money, resources to strengthen the India-Afghan relations. If and when a friendly government comes to power in Kabul, it will have a tremendous positive impact on India's position vis-a-vis Pakistan. Okay, and it will be a nightmare for Pakistan. It's a long story short. Violence in Kashmir is likely to rise when the Taliban is in power in Afghanistan, or when the Afghan-Pakistan border is silent. When the Afghan-Pakistan border is silent, then Pakistan can focus more on where? तो आपने आर्टिकल पढ़ा होगा न्यूज़पेपर में, हो सकता है, that the Taliban have come to power in Afghanistan. Now there is a concern that violence may increase in the Jammu and Kashmir region. उसका मतलब क्या है? यही है that अब उनके पास they don't have much to worry on the western side, they can focus more on the eastern side. You get it? So this is there. This is the Baloch angle to this as well, but that's not a part of our syllabus, at least not till the government decides to talk about it. तो जब गवर्नमेंट बात करेगी तो हमारे सिलेबस के लिए इंपॉर्टेंट होगा, लेकिन अभी नहीं है. इफ यू रिमेंबर, आई रिमेंबर 2000 and आप नहीं पढ़ते होंगे न्यूज़पेपर तब, 2014 or 15, 2015 Republic 2015 Republic Day speech, Prime Minister Modi said he feels the pain of our Baloch brothers and sisters. And that's a big thing to be said by an Indian Prime Minister in an official statement at the highest level. Because if you feel the pain, then you will do something about the pain. But we haven't heard since then, for the next 7 years, anything about the pain that was felt. But if India has felt the pain and it has been acknowledged, and the Pakistanis say India supports Baloch insurgency. हमें आधा तो पता ही नहीं Baloch क्या है, insurgency क्या क्या. But India say, Pakistan says very clearly, India fuels terrorism in Pakistan by supporting Baloch insurgency. ये तो एक मोदी जी ने बोला था. ये दूसरे जूनियर मोदी जी, दोवल साहब, एक बड़े जी एक छोटे सा. Ajit Doval said in a 2012 speech at the Shastra University, it's there on YouTube, it's a 2-minute clip, where he said as much as this, that if Pakistan repeats another 26/11 kind of episode, then it may lose Balochistan. What does that mean? You go out and figure. Okay. What that means possibly is this, that the Baloch insurgency may, it probably means this, that India will support the Baloch insurgency and it will become a big headache for Pakistan. Okay, probably that is what he meant. He never cared to clarify, but for those who could understand, probably this is what it was meant. The Baloch insurgency is a constant pressure in Pakistan. In fact, it is said that without Balochistan, there will be no Pakistan. Okay, because almost half of their, more than 2/3 of their coastline is actually in, almost 2/3 of their coastline, अगर आप जाके कभी मैप देखें, is actually where in Balochistan. ये इतना ही है Balochistan. Except for the Baloch region, Karachi is the only other port that they will ever have. Gwadar is in Balochistan. Okay, तो वो बचेगा ही नहीं पाकिस्तान if Balochistan was to attain independence. So that's another angle, but ठीक है. चलिए. So I've given you the next point is what? The connectivity to Central Asia. देखिए, तो ये सारी इंपॉर्टेंस तो हो गई. एक कनेक्टिविटी क्या है? In Afghanistan, there is what? Something that is called as the Garland Highway, a circular highway connecting all the major cities of Afghanistan. The idea was to construct this Garland Highway. Portions of this Garland Highway were constructed. Okay. Now, it is from here that the Dilaram Zaranj Highway was being constructed and has been successfully constructed by whom? India. India constructed a 150-kilometer long highway where it lost a large number of lives of Indian engineers working in the construction of this project. Who did not want the construction of this road? The Taliban, and obviously the Pakistan not want the construction of this project. But India successfully completed the construction of this rail road link between whom? Dilaram and Zaranj, which connects it to the Garland Highway. I'll give you the handout, it will have that map. This Garland Highway को connect करने के लिए this is the Dilaram Zaranj Highway. This is a 150 kilometer long highway constructed by India. The significance of this is what? That firstly, it provides Afghanistan an alternative access to sea. Right now, Afghanistan is dependent for access to sea on whom? Pakistan. And Pakistan knows that Afghanistan has no other alternative access to sea. So, with the completion of this Dilaram Zaranj highway extending up to the Iran border, what is there? That with this, Iran is going to link this to where? The Chabahar port. Through rail and road network, Iran will link it to the Chabahar port. And from Chabahar, Mundra port is also called as बड़े भाई अदानी पोर्ट. पोर्ट का ही नाम रख दिया अदानी पोर्ट. मुंद्रा पोर्ट को कहते हैं, आप कहीं भी चले जाएं उनको सबको पता है कि मुंद्रा पोर्ट अदानी पोर्ट. I have a very interesting incidents to narrate. Some of my friends who got into the service much before the 2014 independence, they said that when they used to go, and these were people in the Indian Revenue Service, the custom GST wing, that back then it was only customs, not GST. So they would go on you do this India Brahman, right? So Bharat Darshan and all that. So ये Bharat Darshan के लिए they would also, the custom people would definitely go to Mundra port. Okay, so developing port and all that. And in the Mundra port, they would visit the premises, what and how custom clearances are done at the Mundra port, etc. And also they would stay obviously there. Now when they would go on this Bharat Darshan, and when you will go on Bharat Darshan, you will see that apparently the government gives you a certain fund. There's a certain fund given. So आप जाके करिए भारत दर्शन. उससे आप you can stay in a decent 5-star hotel. इतना पैसा देती है सरकार. ठीक है. That is a per day. और उसके basis पे all these people they get. But when they go to Mundra, there's a fleet of cars waiting for them. They don't have to do anything. Everything else is taken care of. They just have to go. Okay. Who takes care of this? Less asked, less answered. सब बम बम भोले चल रहा है. उसके बाद once they visit the premises, etc., and they come back, nobody asks the question who's paying for it, for all their visit, etc. Where the government is opposed, the government gives also money, but it reimburses. आपको दे दिया, वो करना है. But they live in a way more lavish setup for 2-3 days and do a whole visit and all, and then they go back. It is the same Mundra port, जहां आपने अभी काम पढ़ा कितने 1000 किलो हेरोइन, कुछ हजार आर्यन खान into 1 lakh X. India is a country which demands more accountability from Bollywood and Swiggy than it demands from political class. Political class से कोई पूछता ही नहीं कि 1000 किलो हेरोइन कहां से आया और मुंद्रा पोर्ट से कहां से चला गया. But what it does tell you is that this is a very important port. So what has India done? India has managed to operationalize this. It's a big deal. It is a big deal. It's not a small achievement. Why? Because all of this has happened in the light of, in the backdrop of US sanctions on Iran. So US has imposed sanctions on Iran, which has hampered India's ability to fund the development of the Chabahar port and the road link extending up to the Dilaram Zaranj highway. अरे वो Dilaram Zaranj highway that we constructed will be useless if we don't have Chabahar. Okay. So many Indian engineers lost lives. India paid huge financial cost for completing the project. The project is useless if the Chabahar port is not operational. Thankfully, this is operational to a limited extent now, in the sense that if you would have read or heard that India operationalized this route by firstly sending in supplies of certain 1 lakh tons of wheat to Afghanistan. And this was done from this route, which has demonstrated the viability of an alternative sea route to whom? Afghanistan. देखिए आप कितना, and this obviously is a reason why India must give a lot of importance to India-Iran relationship as well. Okay, so you see, this is why this is so important, that Afghanistan also, once we have access through this Garland Highway, India can connect where? To a number of Central Asian countries as well, right? So it will also further access or increase India's access to Central Asian countries as well. Clear? This is the strategic significance of Afghanistan. Okay. Now, so you can write down first about the strategic importance of India-Afghanistan. बाकी भी है कुछ चीजें. Economic significance भी है थोड़ा सा अफगानिस्तान का. Afghanistan has huge reserves of minerals. It has huge reserves of rare earth minerals. It has huge reserves of copper. It has huge reserves of iron. Copper, iron, nickel, cobalt, rare earth, सब है यहाँ. The estimated mineral wealth of Afghanistan is more than 3 trillion US dollars. Okay, बहुत बड़ा है. India was given the contract to do the Haji Kak mines. यहाँ एक mines है, उसका नाम है Haji Kak, which is an iron ore mine. ये 2012 की बात है. India was given this contract that India can do mining here. अरे who will do mining here? If the security is not ensured, how can you do mining? But India was given the contract for the Haji Kak mines. China was given the contract for the Ainak mines, which were a copper mine. Both India and China have been given mines project in the past and in the future. देखिए एकदम सिंपल सी बात है. क्या? If in the future a favorable government or government inclined towards India is ruling in Afghanistan, then who will get mining rights in Afghanistan? India. And India now has a sea route to get that minerals into India or export it from there into third countries. Right? तो ये एक और significance है. देखिए अफगानिस्तान हैज ह्यूज अमाउंट ऑफ मिनरल वेल्थ और कुछ नहीं होने वाला उस मिनरल वेल्थ का. ठीक है. कई बार आपको इसको जियोपॉलिटिक्स में एट टाइम्स इज आल्सो कॉल्ड एज द रिसोर्स कर्स. दैट कंट्रीज व्हिच हैव अ लॉट ऑफ रिसोर्सेस and many potentially competing countries are eyeing those resources, they will all fuel unrest and try to bring a government which favors them. इसको रिसोर्स कर्ज भी कहा जाता है. चलिए छोड़िए. तो बट दिस इज द ब्रॉड कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ द इंडिया अफगानिस्तान रिलेशनशिप. इसी बात पे बलोचिस्तान ऑल्सो, एक ऐसी बता दे रहा हूँ बस आपको, बलोचिस्तान ऑल्सो हैज अ लॉट ऑफ मिनरल्स. द मोस्ट abundant mineral found in Balochistan is gold. Balochistan is called the land of gold. It is a common Baloch saying that the Baloch people walk over gold. Okay, there's a tremendous gold reserves in this region, but mining them requires resources and stability. But also Baloch region lacks water, drinking water. So mining is challenging here and it requires stability and all also. And the Baloch will not give that up to the establishment in Islamabad. Khair. चलिए, somebody should make Baloch files also. Okay. अरे मैं आइडिया दे रहा हूँ आपको, फुल सीरीज बन सकते. आप अगर आप बलोचिस्तान की हिस्ट्री पढ़ लेंगे, हाउ इट बिकेम अ पार्ट ऑफ पाकिस्तान, यू विल बी लाइक इस पे बननी चाहिए मूवी. चल, मेरे पास बहुत सारे आइडिया, कोई लेता ही नहीं. चलिए. सो स्ट्रैटेजिक इंपॉर्टेंस ऑफ of Afghanistan. I've given this in the handout, so I'm not going to write it in too much detail, but broad points I'm writing. वो handout you'll get tomorrow. So in terms of strategic importance of Afghanistan is that, or strong India-Afghanistan relations will serve India's strategic what? Interests. How? Strong India-Afghanistan relations will serve India's strategic interests by A. Denying strategic depth to Pakistan as Islamabad often aims to use Afghanistan as its second base vis-a-vis whom? India. B. A strong India-Afghan relations will put immense pressure on Pakistan to focus on increasing its troop presence along the western border with Afghanistan given the long-standing differences between the two over what? Over the Durand Line and control of Peshawar. This will force Pakistan to decrease this will force Pakistan to divert its troops from the eastern border with India and thus lower India-Pakistan tensions. It's the second point. Third, that strong India-Afghan relations will prevent whom? Will prevent Afghanistan from strong India-Afghan relations will prevent Afghanistan from being serving as a safe haven for Pak-sponsored terror groups targeting whom? India. Like and ensure targeting India and ensure that incidences such as the Kandahar hijack of 1998 are not repeated. Yes. So ये तो हो गया. And apart from this, there are other points which relate to what Afghanistan or strong India-Afghan relations will ensure access to Central Asia and potential access to the huge mining reserves. Yes, the huge mining reserves of Afghanistan. Potential access to whom? Indian companies. The huge mining reserves of Afghanistan. So these are what? Potential. These are the potential yes. Strategic culture and strategic depth are two different things. Strategic depth, as I told you, is largely this concept of whether you have the geographical depth to mount a counter response after an initial setback. ठीक है, तो एक geographical concept है, which is your ability of your country to mount a counter offensive after facing an initial setback. Strategic culture refers to a way of thinking amongst your decision making community, whether there is a long term, whether there is the culture of thinking of long term, taking a long term view of the relationship. लॉन्ग टर्म व्यू मतलब 1 साल 2 साल नहीं, 15 साल 20 साल 30 साल 50 साल. ओके, मैं आपको बताता हूं क्यों आता ये टर्म ही क्यों आया स्ट्रैटेजिक कल्चर. बिकॉज ऑफन पीपल आर इंक्लाइंड टू थिंक शॉर्ट टर्म, and strategic culture and foreign policy often says that whether are you taking a long term view of the relationship, keeping your what interest in mind? Security interest in mind. इंडिया लैक, तो जो लोग बोलते हैं कि इंडिया लैक स्ट्रेटेजिक कल्चर, दे आर ट्राइंग टू से दैट इंडियन डिसीजन मेकर्स often don't take a long-term view of India's interest in mind. Don't keep a long-term or don't take a long-term view of India's interest in mind. They may often be inclined to view India's relations with other countries from the perspective of short-term gains. देखिए क्या रशिया, देखिए क्या कहा जाता है, अरे हो गया रशिया के दिन लद गए, Russia is of no use to India, why is India betting on the wrong horse? And all of a sudden, when China and India, Doklam question, and then the Galwan episode, India looked towards whom? Russia for supplying the S-400 systems, right? Which is crucial for India's defense. Who supplied? Russia. Despite Russia being close to China. Because, and from the strategic perspective, it has always been said, theek hai, that India-US relation is important, but India cannot sacrifice India-Russia relationship to please US. Because from India's strategic concern point of view, long-term interest point of view, the Russia relationship is important. Same said about which country? Iran. Same said about which country? Afghanistan. That you can't ignore Iran and Afghanistan saying yahan to kuch nahi hai. Okay, because Iran, for example, you can't say, okay, because of US sanctions, if US is saying don't do trade with Iran, we should stop buying oil altogether completely from Iran or cut off all economic linkages from Iran. Because Iran is crucial for India's long-term strategic interest in Afghanistan, having sea access to Afghanistan. And Afghanistan is important for India's long-term strategic interest with respect to Pakistan. So think long-term. ऐसे नहीं कि $2 billion दे दिए, अब क्या होगा, अब तो कुछ हो नहीं रहा है, मिल नहीं रहा, 2 साल हो गए, 5 साल हो गए. Long-term game. Right? That's called strategic culture. Decision making in foreign policy, if it's done keeping the long-term view in mind, it's called strategic culture. चलिए, Paul Science type के सवाल मत पूछिए. Now, so this is about interest. Next, coming to a brief historical context of whom? The India-Afghan relationship. देखिए बड़ा सिंपल है. Uh, 1979, Soviet Union supported the formation of a communist government in where? Afghanistan. Question is, why is Soviet Union interested in Afghanistan? Very simply, because Soviet Union sees, देखिए north of Afghanistan is what? Central Asian countries like Tajikistan, okay, like Turkmenistan, etc., etc. But all these Central Asian countries are a part of Soviet Union. उसके नीचे क्या है? Below Soviet Union, if you go south of the Soviet Union, then comes Afghanistan. In Central Asia, if you go south of Soviet Union, comes what? Afghanistan. And then below it comes what? South of Afghanistan comes Iran and Pakistan. है ना? तो देखिए, why has been the Soviet Union very keen about in the past, keen about what? Afghanistan, is because it will allow them, if they have a favorable government in Afghanistan, then through Afghanistan, they can have a possible sea access, either through Pakistan or through Iran. Why do the Soviets want sea access? Because I told you they don't have many warm water. So they want warm water ports, and Afghanistan, and through Afghanistan they could possibly in the future have access to warm water ports in the Indian Ocean region and station their navy also in the Indian Ocean region. They're keen on having some presence in Afghanistan. And the Soviets supported the formation of the communist government in Afghanistan in 1979. Who opposed? US opposed. For USA to oppose, who supported US? Who is US friend in South Asia in Cold War? Pakistan. Pakistan is a willing partner of United States during the Cold War era, and US is of the opinion to limit the Soviet presence in Afghanistan. Who is saying, okay, we will play a positive role in limiting Soviet presence in Afghanistan? Pakistan. So if US has to support a counter or an anti-Soviet insurgency in Afghanistan, how will it happen? Through the support of Pakistan. ठीक है, तो इसका ये है सिंपल सा इतिहास, that after the Soviets supported the formation of the government in Afghanistan between 1979 till 1989, क्या हुआ? That there was the anti-communist movement where? In Afghanistan, which was provided arms and training by USA and Pakistan. In fact, US troops and Pakistani troops provided arms and training to the anti-communist movement in Afghanistan. And this anti-communist movement was led predominantly by sections of the Pashtun leadership. Why are the Pashtuns opposing the Soviet government? Soviet government is communist. Communist people not do big on religion. Okay. So, and then under the Soviet period, there is a certain degree of westernization of Afghanistan, and whether in education or elsewhere in public life also. And more importantly, what was said was that this government in Kabul is actually the one which is supported by the communists. Okay. So this is being opposed by USA and their willing partner in South Asia, and that is Pakistan. By 1989, after 10 years of Soviets also providing the communist government what? Funds and arms, and even stationing Soviet troops to defend the communist government. In 1989, the Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan. Then what happened? It is at this time that in 1989, it was the Najibullah government which was a communist government, which headed, this communist government headed whom? Headed the Afghan government. Soviet Union withdrew from Afghanistan in 1989. 91 ke tak they are collapsing whom? Soviet Union collapsed. And by 92 who collapsed? Najibullah government. Once the Najibullah government collapsed, the question was, now who will rule Afghanistan? And now began what? The contest over who will rule Afghanistan. The Pakistan supported faction of the anti-communist guerrillas who were trained and armed by US were the ones which formed eventually the group called The Taliban. Right? And that is how the Taliban is formed, which wants to form the next government in Afghanistan. However, and this is about Afghanistan, I told you the Pashtuns are concentrated where? A dominant, if I was to say, the Pashtuns, I told you, are concentrated, are the dominant community, are the dominant political elites in Afghanistan, and they are concentrated in the, what one could say is the south and the east of whom? Afghanistan. They concentrated in the south and east of Afghanistan. But another prominent ethnic community in Afghanistan is whom? Anybody? Whom? The Tajiks. Tajikistan is north of Afghanistan, and a prominent ethnic community in the northern portions of Afghanistan bordering Tajikistan are the Tajiks. That's another major ethnic community. Now, between 92 to 96, for 4 years, it is a contest between whom? The Taliban and the Tajiks, led by the Tajik leader Ahmad Shah Massoud. कोई बात, ये सब कहानी ही है, कोई पूछेगा नहीं, लेकिन ये पता होना चाहिए, क्योंकि इससे आपको ये पता चलेगा what India has done in the past. Where? In Afghanistan. Najib government collapsed, and in 1992 to 96 there is almost a civil war kind of a situation where in Afghanistan, where the Tajiks led by whom? Ahmad Shah Massoud the Tajiks led by Ahmad Shah Massoud formed a provisional government in Kabul. Which was strongly being contested and opposed by whom? The Pashtun Taliban led group by Mullah Omar. छोड़ दीजिए, कोई बात नहीं, ठीक है. The Pashtun Taliban led group, which was a rival group claiming power. बस अब क्या है? Who supported the Taliban? Pakistan. Who supported the Tajik-led group? There. India. India provided support to whom? The Tajik-led group by Ahmad Shah Massoud and his provisional government. Initially, it seemed that the Tajiks were going to win in this civil war, and India provided arms, training and funds to the Tajik-led government of Ahmad Shah Massoud, which was called as the Northern what? Alliance. Northern क्यों भैया? I told you, in the north of Afghanistan, right? So they formed the Northern Alliance. So the Northern Alliance and the Taliban had this contest. India was providing financial assistance, troops, as well as arms to the Tajik government. Ahmad Shah Massoud was the leader, and Ahmad Shah Massoud's family, still you would have read abhi bhi usme, the last area to fall after Taliban took over power from the Panjshir Valley, the Lion of Panjshir, that's Ahmad Shah Massoud's family. right? Ahmad Shah Massoud's son was the one who was the last one to give up in this. Once the US withdrew, the Taliban took control of Afghanistan. The Tajiks were the last one to give up. But long story cut short, right now, this is what happened. And India provided this kind of support to the Tajik government, the Tajik group-led government of Northern Alliance. It ruled till 1996. Okay, but it fell. And who eventually came to power? The Taliban. Because the Taliban is being supported by Pakistan, Pakistan is also has certain support from US, and they're fueling in the funds and the arms and all of that. Okay, and more importantly, by the way, in this whole process, once this civil war is ongoing, it's going on even from 1979 and then 80s also, then 90s also. There is a huge refugee burden of Afghan refugees going to Pakistan. More than 1 million Afghan refugees went to Pakistan, and they stayed where? In Peshawar, Northwest Frontier Province region, and some and others, but in Peshawar region also. So this is becoming a further headache for Pakistan. Okay, so but this is happening. Then Taliban came to power. Taliban came to power in 96, but matter did not stop. Ahmad Shah Massoud kept fighting against whom? The Taliban, ultimately until 2002, when he was captured by whom? The Taliban, and was hanged. Okay, so Massoud's fight continued, but that was a fight that they eventually lost. In the meanwhile, once Taliban came to power, 98, what happened? Kandahar hijack. And then in 2002, what happened? Al-Qaeda, 9/11. बस फिर यूएस इंटरवेंशन इन अफगानिस्तान. देखिए, Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda attacked US, the Twin Tower attack, whatever. But the attack was carried out by Al-Qaeda, not by Taliban. Okay, and Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, basically they carried out the attack, but it was not carried out by Taliban. The US government categorically said that they will make no distinction between Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. George W. Bush said, we'll make no distinction between those who committed the act. Who committed the act? Al-Qaeda, and those who provided a safe harbor to them. That is the Taliban. And they bombed Afghanistan, left, right, center, and took the Taliban out of power. And then once the Taliban was removed from power, the question was what? The question was what? Who will next rule Afghanistan? देखिए, सवाल ये नहीं है. The easier part of any regime change is to remove the existing ruler. The difficult part is to put a new ruler who is able to rule effectively. The Taliban was removed in 2002, and after that, a new Afghan civilian government was put to power. Where? In Afghanistan. This is where the Hamid Karzai government came in, and then others. Since 2002 till 2020, a US-backed civilian government was installed in whom? Afghanistan. While between 2002 to 20, the US-backed civilian government was installed in Afghanistan. What did India do? In this 2002 to 20 period, as the US provided a certain degree of stability in Afghanistan, taking out whom? The Taliban, the same Taliban that they had nurtured. The same Taliban that they had nurtured, once they took out the Taliban and the new civilian government was installed, India looked and saw an opportunity on regaining lost ground in Afghanistan and went ahead towards strengthening its relations with the Afghan government. And one part of that was to provide humanitarian assistance, developmental assistance to Afghanistan and support the civilian government in Afghanistan. Who is not going to be happy with the civilian government? And Taliban. See, the Taliban is removed from power. Taliban is not wiped out. Because the Talibani fighters basically went where? Into the hills. Which hills? The same hills in this region between the Tora Bora hills and other hills along this region between Afghanistan and Pakistan along the Durand lines. Afghanistan did carpet bombing of these hills. US did carpet bombing of these hills. USA had this B-52 bomber. They had not used it anywhere also, apart from briefly in Iraq. It is one of the most expensive fighters that the US has ever produced. And they wanted to, let's try it out somewhere. Right, so they kept bombing whom? The hilly region in this region, the Tora Bora hills and the other hills in these region. And the Taliban are like, okay, whenever they would come down to bomb, they would go and hide in the mountains. And for 18 years, kept happening. USA fought their most expensive war ever in history in Afghanistan. The US spent more than $3 trillion trillion US dollars in fighting this war, along with the humanitarian assistance, etc. $3 trillion US dollars. Their longest war, इसके पहले जो उनकी longest war थी, was Vietnam, but Vietnam was eclipsed by the Afghan wars. The Afghanistan, the Taliban soldiers had no military muscle to match whom? The US. But what they had was time. The popular Afghan saying at this time was this: you may what? You may have the watch, we have the time. You may have the latest technology, gadgetry, radar, dishum bishum. We have the time. We don't have to go anywhere. We will come back once you are tired. We'll wait for you to get tired. Kar lo jo karna hai. We have lived here for centuries. We'll live here for centuries. We will wait for the day till you get exhausted. And then we'll reclaim what anyways belongs to us. And therein comes the Pashtun history that the Soviets, Afghanistan is called the graveyard of empires for a reason, that many players have sought to rule over Afghanistan, and all of those great powers have found to their behest that they have never managed to rule Afghanistan. The first who came in this region were possibly were the Russians in the 1800s. They wanted to establish their control in the region. They did not succeed. Then British India wanted to establish. They did not succeed. Then the Soviets wanted to do. They did not succeed. You try your luck, you will also not succeed. And USA, and they said, we will bide our time, we'll wait till US gets war exhausted, and we'll reclaim our influence in the region once the Americans are gone. And in 2020, America withdrew its troops from Afghanistan. And India between 2000 and America withdrew its troops from Afghanistan. By the way, between 2002 to 20, India spent some more than $1 in fact more than 2 billion US dollars in providing humanitarian and developmental assistance. To whom? Afghans. And we'll talk about this in some detail later. But who withdrew? This troop presence 2020 May, Trump started the process. Now, if you think that Trump started the process, you are mistaken. Obama started this in 2012. वो 2012 से withdraw कर रहे थे troops थोड़ा. And in 2020, Trump showed the resolve to bring a quick end to their troop deployment. And then Biden administration came and the troops were withdrawn completely, whatever, right? And the concern was that as America withdraws its troops, will there be a repeat of what? Will there be a repeat of what happened when the Taliban came to power first? As the USA withdrew its troops, who came to power? Taliban 2.0. This was called Taliban 2.0, right? Because the Taliban 1.0 had come to power between 96 to 2002. After 20 years of exile, the Taliban came back to power. And the concern was and has been that will it be a repeat of Taliban 1.0? The 2.0 will it be similar to 1.0 or not? And if yes, then what are the implications for India? If no, then what are the implications? वो implications वाला part हम कल discuss करेंगे. Any questions till here? Yes. So we'll talk about this tomorrow. As to the one, he's asking two questions. One is what interests were behind USA's intervention in Afghanistan for such a prolonged intervention, and did USA win the Afghan war, or were its objectives met? Right? ये बातें हम कल कर लेंगे. बहुत ज्यादा नहीं करूंगा मैं इन चीजों पे बात, but briefly we'll talk about it. Why did India support the Tajik government? Because India wanted to have a friendly government in Afghanistan, which is not under the control of Pakistan. No, to have our own influence in Afghanistan, we want a friendly government. Right? आप बोलेंगे अपोज पाकिस्तान, हमारा है ही नहीं है अपोज करना पाकिस्तान को. We want to have friendly relations with Afghanistan.